Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Grace Costa, a commercial photographer of over 2 decades, a photo-based artist and a photography mentor. This podcast opens up a secret diary about the world of the photography industry. We'll bring you inspiring interviews with industry professionals, as well as stories and tips to help you propel through your photography journey, whether you're just starting out or a seasoned pro. Thanks for joining me today. Now let's open the latest diary.
Hi friends, welcome back to the Photo Diaries podcast. My name is Trish Johnston and I'm the creative director of Oath & Stone, a bespoke graphic design studio based in Canberra. Don't worry, you're in the right place. In a very special episode, Grace has allowed me to take over her podcast and ask her a few questions of my own. You may already be familiar with her business story and where she's come from, but I wanted to dig a little deeper and get all the inside information and hopefully uncover some stories that she wouldn't have normally shared if she was on her own. Please enjoy my chat with Grace. I have got a bunch of rapid fire questions, so we're going to go through them, and you haven't heard these questions before, so it's going to be a bit of a surprise.
All right, let's do it. Sounds fun.
I know you're a Beatles fan, so what Beatles song can you listen to without getting sick of?
In My Life. It's such a beautiful song.
Yes. If you could be instantly good at something without failing, what would you do?
Ooh. Instantly good without... Do you mean a career?
Maybe anything. Like for me, I'd like to go to the Olympics, but I know that it'd be something that I would be instantly good at. So suddenly I'm a Olympic downhill skier without any training, and I think that would be amazing.
Gee, I don't know for sure, but let's just say a painter, an artist painter.
Beautiful. What is your favourite thing hanging on your wall in your home at the moment?
Oh, I'm going to say not any of my horses because I'm very tired of seeing them. My favourite thing is a painted portrait. There's two. There's a painted portrait of my little girl. A friend of mine painted her portrait as a baby, and that hangs in the corridor. And a Penelope Boyd I purchased a couple of years ago. It's black with a blonde hyper-realist portrait of a young girl with a butterfly called Visitation, and that was an investment for me at the time, and I'm so glad it's mine and it's in my home. I love it every single day.
What song would come on every time you entered a room?
Love Shack?
Love Shack?
That is such a daggy song. I know it, but I just love it.
Have you got backup dancers as well?
No, it's just me. All in.
Just you.
Going real hard.
Love it. So what is your go-to emoji?
Camera?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Italy. Yeah.
Is there a specific smell that instantly takes you back to a happy memory?
Probably the smell of espresso coffee being boiled on the stove, because my grandmother, my nonna, Italian nonna, used to make coffee that way. And when I was little, being in her kitchen, that was the fragrance that I still remember today. Whenever I smell it, it takes me back. And a second smell, happy memory, maybe not happy memory, but a smell that gives me memories is burning rosemary, because I grew up in Catholic school going to church, and they used to burn rosemary for some of the ceremonies. I don't quite remember when they would burn it, but that smell of burning rosemary or incense, whatever it is, yeah, would bring back memories too.
Okay, my next one is, if you were a piece of art, what medium would you be created in?
Oh, probably I'd like to be created in 3D form, so like a sculpture, probably clay.
Clay, okay, interesting.
Smooth, rounded edges, I don't know. And maybe I'd make that sculpture quite tall, taller than I actually am.
Well, you can be anything you want without failing. So in your ideal home, what view do you have from your window?
Kind of like an English garden. I love English gardens, manicured lawns, manicured hedges, beautiful, colourful flowers everywhere, and horses running nearby.
Oh, that sounds nice. It'd be nice to have a cup of tea in that kitchen, I think.
You're invited to my garden party.
All right, and this one is my last one. It's a little bit of a loaded question. How do you feel about fairy bread?
I've still never had it.
Still never had it.
It sounds a bit gross. So that's probably why I've never had it. And I didn't go to many kids' parties growing up because we lived on a farm. So I guess I missed out on fairy bread. So yeah, I've still never had it.
When I heard that you hadn't had fairy bread, I just had this uncontrollable urge to make fairy bread and drop it on your doorstep. But you were like, no, it sounds horrible. I was like, you've got to try it. It's a rite of passage. And you were like, no. So that's still my goal.
I don't think I will try it. It smells good. Somebody bought me a candle that's called fairy bread, and the smell of it is divine. I just want to eat it, but I don't think eating actual fairy bread would be as enjoyable as this candle. Anyway, I'll try it one day.
So that's the end of my rapid fire questions. Thank you very much. So what I wanted to ask you today, and your listeners have probably already or can go back and listen to your episode about where you've come from and where you're working. But the first question that I have for you is, when you left your job at Defence as a corporate photographer, what made you want to start your own business? Why didn't you just go work for someone else after that?
I did apply for another job, but it wasn't quite the right role. I guess because I wanted to jump fast, the situation I was in was not all that great. And I guess it was like this open door moment where it was an opportunity to somebody said to me, well, why don't you just do your own thing and work for yourself? And I feel like that was the first time I had ever even considered it. So it all happened really fast. That person asked me that question. I was looking to leave anyway in some capacity. And then before I knew it, it was like, have the conversation with my husband. Could I leave? Could I make this work? And, give you 2 weeks notice, and I was gone. So I never intended to run my own business as far as having a dream was concerned. But when the moment was, I was faced with that moment and that opportunity, I was like, you know what? Just give it a go. I can see I do have potential. I've achieved so much outside of my career in defence. Like, I was doing all these great things like the TED Talk and these exhibitions and creating lots of personal work. Why don't I give myself more chance to see what else I'm capable of? And I just sort of kept it at that. I didn't think of business as such and how big my business was going to grow. I didn't have that mindset at that time. I just was like, all right, let's just see what I'm capable of. Let's just jump. I'll get some payout and, let's figure it out along the way.
Yeah, interesting. Because not a lot of people would even consider running their own business. They'd just be like, well, if that job's not the right one for me, I need to find another one, and I keep looking. But have you always had that entrepreneurial spirit inside of you, or was it only when someone said, hey, why don't you do your own thing, that it was even an option?
That's a good question, because I never wanted to run a business. My family came from horse riding school. We had our own family business, and I thought business was hard, so I wanted to avoid it at all costs. And plus, since I graduated from photography school, I had always been employed for other people's studios. So I just thought, no, that's my life. I just work for other people, and I loved doing that. I liked being told what to do. I liked, just being a good employee and serving clients. And even when I was at Defence and I was about to leave, I still didn't really believe that I had an entrepreneurial spirit, because I wasn't ever following things like that, except maybe Collective magazine. That inspired me a lot, because that was stories about people starting businesses. So maybe subconsciously I had an interest there. But when I jumped, I just had to learn how to run a business, and I thought I would be really bad at it, because I just looked how hard it was for my family. And then I just checked in with them and I said, well, how did our business actually go? And they said, it was thriving. We did so well. And I only saw the negative stuff, like, staff issues, like trying to get people to work at the writing school. That was hard for us. And I guess, I just had to realize I came from a good family business, therefore I can be good in business. And then I learned that I was actually really interested in business, and I'm totally obsessed with it now. That's all I read about, watch, learn. I attend every workshop, training, everything that's out there. I'm super absorbed in running a business, and I feel like I was made for this.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I can relate to that because my parents owned a small business as well. When I was in primary school, they owned a florist business and a balloon decorating business while my dad still had his corporate job. So I realized later when I started my business that I'd already had this model to look at and reference. So starting a business, actually, when I think about it, it wasn't that foreign to me. I'd seen it played out in front of me. But you're right, I did see the struggles of my parents working on weekends and having to deliver balloons on a Saturday afternoon and juggling sort of pick up of my sister and I at extracurricular activities. So it's interesting that when you actually, asked your dad or your parents about that, then you went, oh, it's actually thriving. Maybe I can do this. So that was a really beautiful realization for yourself that actually I'm about to take this leap. Maybe it is actually possible. On the first day that you were running the business for yourself, so you've left your job at Defence, and the first day that you were on your own, so to speak, how did that first day feel?
Gee, I don't remember, Trish. That was a long time ago. I can answer that question. How about I turn that question and say, the moment I left, how did I feel? Because I remember crying so much the day I left that job, because I had identified myself in that job for so long, and I thought it was the best job in Canberra, for photographers. Nobody else could have it. It was mine. And then to decide to let that go felt like a transformation. It felt like shedding a skin. That's why I think I cried so much, because I had to shed a part of me and release everything that job was to me. And I had grown up in that role. So I cried a lot. And then I remember at the steps of Russell offices, my colleague escorted me out, and I feel like crying now. It was a huge moment for me. It was huge. And I just remember feeling like this is my next adventure. I am ready for this. Without all the sort of lead up to me being pushed out the door, I probably wouldn't have left. I would have stayed there and just, or maybe I wouldn't have, I don't know. But, everything comes to an end, and it takes bravery to change things. And for me, I felt brave and I felt ready, and I felt like I'm super excited for whatever is next. Bring it on. Even though I had no clients. No clients to speak of, but I knew I was ready.
So thinking back to before you worked at Defence, so you've gone through TAFE and you're working at your first job or your first couple of jobs, what were the skills that you learnt in those first couple of jobs that have helped you in those first couple of years in the business?
Probably learning how to manage clients. I worked for a number of different studios in Canberra, and learning how to manage clients, how to manage your booking system, how to follow up with clients, like follow up with new leads, liaising with people, as well as studio stuff. Like we did a lot of, studio work, so studio lighting, retouching, file management, that sort of thing. I think all those things, I learned really early on in the piece that have helped me now. I wish I had paid more attention to admin side of things, like writing invoices, quotes, because in the beginning when I first started, I didn't really know how to do that, because the studios I worked for, that was taken care of by somebody else, and I didn't see that happen. It was all sort of behind the scenes. So yeah, I had to learn a lot of things along the way.
Well, it's very common, isn't it, for maybe artistic types like you and I. I'm a graphic designer, you're a photographer and an artist. We're very good at our craft, and suddenly we start a business and you've got to not only be a graphic designer or a photographer, but you need to know how to do your accounts and invoice and be a marketer and do advertising. So for all the things that you didn't know how to do and things you hadn't learnt in your previous jobs or learnt through mentors, which I want to go into a little bit later, how did you find that information? What did you do on day one when you were like, oh no, now I've got to do my tax or I've got to do all these things that someone did for me before?
I think I started meeting people in business, and then networking through them led me to a business coach, actually, because one of my networks introduced me to my business mentor, Suze Chadwick. So I enrolled in one of her courses, and it was a long-term course where it taught you how to build your systems and structures in your business, your pricing and packaging, all the back-end stuff of running a business. So I think getting into Suze's training early on in the piece really is what I needed, because I wanted those step-by-step instructions of how to set myself up. Yeah, that was the number one thing that I invested in. And then ever since then, more training on marketing. Like I do probably training every single month about marketing, whether it's social media, email marketing, design, anything. I'm always learning and upskilling in the marketing side, because I didn't know that either. All the studios I worked for, I never had a hand in the marketing. So I'm learning this firsthand for the first time, and finding mentors around marketing, around running a business. And, I'm looking for people to lead me into that stuff.
We were talking about this the other day about not asking how to do something, but finding the who, finding someone who has done what you have done before. So do you have any people, especially in the early days or even now, that you look to for business inspiration, or someone who is doing something in the business world that you really admire?
Gee, there's so many, so many. Like, I think of Suze Chadwick, Marie Forleo, gosh, all the American girls I follow, so many. So yeah, look, I'm not short of mentors. I'm not short of people leading me down the path. I just can switch on Instagram and I'm given 10 tips in 1 second.
And maybe you can tell me about, I know we were chatting before about your mentors that you had at Defence, at the last corporate job that you had. There were two people there who were very influential in, you mentioned that you'd grown up in that job. So it sounded like you'd really developed your work ethic and the standard of work. So can you tell me a little bit more about how they were influential on maybe that next step, and maybe things that they'd done to prepare you for that huge leap?
Yeah, I guess without even knowing, they did prepare me to run my own business, because they let me run my studio at Defence like it was my own. I was the main photographer there. I'd been there 11 years, so they let me just take control of the clients, the bookings, the shoots, and then we'll balance it out with the other photographer. But I was the only female in that team, so all the men were older than me, and Mark and Phil were my two mentors. They were my supervisors, and they'd already been in the industry 30 odd years as military photographers. So they were now civilians. They had run their own business as well. So they had sort of taught me along the way the standard of delivery for client work. They would always pull me up on things like cropping. That could be tighter, that could be cleaner. How about you retouch that? You shouldn't be delivering it like that. How about you try this? Give these options to the client. All that kind of stuff they set up for me. Something really small but impactful was Mark always asked me to give me the best 10 of every shoot. So give him the best 10. So say I just photographed a military parade, he'd say, right, deliver me the best 10. And so that helped me discern what was top-notch photos. Out of 200 images, I had to learn what was the best of the best. And actually having that as a skill in my business shows me how to deliver the best of the best to a client and not give them everything, because when you narrow things down, the best stuff stands out more, right? And so that can translate in putting your portfolio on your Instagram or on your website. The best 10 is kind of a good little tactic to use. But, you know, they were always critiquing my work, and it showed me the value of critique and feedback because it made me a better photographer. It made me see things through their experienced eyes. And as well as, you know, learning how to deal with clients. And Phil always said, people won't remember you for the work you did, they'll remember you for the dodgies you did for them. And the dodgies would be like somebody would come to our studio and say, "Oh, Grace, I know you're busy, but can you please scan this old family photo for us and retouch it for my grand's 50th birthday?" So they would remember you for the little sneakies you would do in between. And so Phil always sort of taught me to accommodate for the sneakies.
That's really interesting because that's not usually how the saying goes, is it? That's, you know, people will remember how you made them feel, not the dodges that you've done on the side.
Well, I guess it sort of goes hand in hand.
But that is very memorable, though.
Memorable because, well, it's still making them feel seen, feel valued, feel accommodated for. And I guess that could translate in business now where we might go, oh, okay, what's that little bit extra that this client wants that I don't have to be tight about it and charge them? You know, if it's just going to take me 2 seconds to do, I'm not going to charge them $50. So I guess he was sort of teaching me that kind of mindset, just to be a bit more flexible.
And just going above and beyond, really, just going, you know, if we see an opportunity to make this really stand out and make this experience really great for someone, then how can we go above and beyond? And I definitely see that in your work as well. Even just say a couple of times I've referred you on to some of my clients, and then I get a nice little card in the mail or a thank you note or a box of chocolates. And I think that you don't need to do that, but it makes me feel really good and appreciated. So while maybe at the end of your experience at that job, you know, things had shifted and they weren't so great, it sounds like you definitely got a lot of experience and a lot of things that you apply in your business now. Is that one of the more memorable jobs that you have, or are there other jobs that you've had? Because you've had such a varied career. You've done military photography, you've done babies in pot plants, you've done family photography.
I've done glamour photography. I worked in glamour portrait studio in Canberra, worked for Kodak, worked for another lab, you know, selling cameras, printing digital photos. I think the military job was the most memorable in a way because it was so varied. You know, I was shooting everything from, you know, high profile people going to the Governor General's house, shooting cocktail parties there, to going out field with the Army cadets, you know, roughing it, photographing their military training, you know, shooting weapons, and to portraits and cadets, to, you know, product photography, retouching, all sorts. So that job just encompassed all aspects of photography in the one role. And I think that's where I grew the most and became an expert, really. When I got into that job, I was already 10 years into my career, but that last 11 years there, you know, that was the training ground that made me great and made me the photographer I am, so that I can see and teach and pass on knowledge that you know, Mark and Phil gave me so much. You know, I'm so grateful for what they taught me. And you can be trained, and I was trained 3 years, but on the job, there's nothing like that kind of hands-on, throw you in the deep end kind of training. It's so different. So I think you need both.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most common things that comes, I see in junior designers as well. They spend 3 years at uni and then they do their internships in probably their last, I think in their third year. And one intern in particular who spent some time with me, she goes, I feel like I've learnt more in the last 2 months than I have in, say, the last year at uni. And I think there's no substitution for on-the-job, hands-on training. Can you remember a time, and I'm asking you to, you've got such a long career at this stage, I'm asking you to think about a long time. When did something not go quite to plan, and what did you learn from it that's helped you today?
The only thing that comes up straight away is I went to the Governor General's house. I had a massive camera bag and I pulled out the camera, started to photograph the cocktail party. I arrived early, which was good. And then I couldn't find a memory card. And I was like, oh, damn, where the heck is this memory card? And I frantically looked around in all the pockets, and it was a huge camera bag. So it had lots of pockets. And I thought, nah, I'm going to stop looking around. I'm just going to jump in the car, drive back to Duntroon, get a memory card, and come back. So I wasted a good 20 minutes doing that and, missed 20 minutes of the job. But what that taught me, and I even told my supervisor about it, embarrassingly, I told him that that's what happened. And from then on, the both of us kept a memory card in our wallets. I had one on the, in a keychain in a little pouch that was on the public service tag. And so I always had a memory card from there on. So I never had that situation where I forget. But I was taught just to take a photo before you leave the studio and go to the job so that you know that the memory card is in there. Just get into the practice of just taking a couple of shots so that everything's working and then get in the car and go. So that was a very valuable lesson. And I don't think anyone from the Governor General's house knew that happened. I was quite discreet and got away with it.
No, well, you will never forget that now. I think it's burned in your memory. Like even every conversation that we have. So, for example, every time I buy some chai, I think of you, or every time I'm brewing a cup of tea, I'm triggered by you. And it's interesting what you said before about the smell of coffee brewing reminded you of, being in your nonna's kitchen and these beautiful smells that really trigger our memory. I'm wondering, is there an image maybe you think back to, whether it's, a high profile one at Defence, or maybe it's a family or a glamour photo that you took earlier than that? Is there a photo that stands out in your memory that maybe represents a time in your career when things were going really well, or maybe not going so well, or maybe a photo that represents a highlight of your career up until now?
Good question, Trish. All right. It's got to be when Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth came to Duntroon, the Royal Military College where I worked. All the public were invited. It was a very, very secure, high-profile event. We practiced and practiced. So that was my zone, like that was my home. But then all these foreign photographers from the media, from the British media, from the Queen's Palace, they'd had all come and we all had to work together. And I was stuck in what's called a media pit, this tiny little, 4x4 little square patch of ground we all had to share with one another. And when the Queen was marching towards us, towards our cameras, I remember the photographers bullied me a little, because they were all just trying to get their shot. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to get the shot. So I just had to drop to the ground and shoot from the ground while they all stood up, because I wasn't tall. And so I couldn't compete with height, and I wasn't a pushy person. I found that really confronting. Even though it was my territory, I didn't own it at the time and I didn't push back. I just had to find a different way, and I just got myself low, shot down below, and somebody took a photograph of me in that position. And I remember looking at that going, at least I found a way to make the shot. Like, that was vital. If I had missed that shot, I would have been in a lot of strife. And that image that I got is not perfect. I would have liked the alignment to be different, but anyone else that would see that shot would just go, oh, that's a fabulous image. But I know it could be a little bit better if I had a different position. And that shot is memorable to me because of that scene and what it meant for me.
Oh, wow. What an experience. I don't think a lot of photographers would get an experience like that, to photograph the Queen or be in a paparazzi situation where you're being bullied and elbows are going out and everything, but you found a way to make it work. And you found, I think that's actually reflective of that entrepreneurial spirit. And it's like, well, if everyone's going left, I'm going to go right, and finding solutions to things. Switching gears a little bit into your ability to collect friends and bring people together, which is actually how we met. We were at a Business Chicks event, and I don't think I had a choice in being your friend from that moment onwards.
Nobody has a choice, Trish.
No one has a choice. You're just suddenly, you're like, what happened? Grace is in my life. And I think that you have this ability to bring people together, and you feel very comfortable in, or maybe you don't feel so comfortable, but you do it anyway. So an example that I can give is when you were at the portrait gallery recently, because you're a finalist in the National Portrait Prize, the NPPPP. And I came to see, I think it was a Saturday, and I came to see the exhibition just to view it. And you were there doing workshops with your fellow finalists. And we were having a coffee while you were having a break. And you just grabbed me and said, Trish, sit down here. This is Bob and Susan and Terry, and they're from Western Australia, and they're from Northern Territory, and they're from Sydney. And this is and you just knew everything about these people. And suddenly I was sitting at a table with people that I'd never met, and we were having conversations, but you were just in your element. You were bringing people together. Who are you? Sit down, have some lunch. Have you got a coffee? Right. You wanted to make sure everyone was okay. Everyone knew each other. And just suddenly you were just holding court at this table and had 10 new friends. So I wonder whether you can tell me a little bit more about the joy that you get from bringing photographers together, or artists or small business men and women together, and maybe what your plans are for the next year in terms of doing more of that, because it's obviously something you love doing.
I love doing it, and networking is my superpower. I love making friends. I always have. I've always been a friendly kind of person. And I feel like the world is my friend. I don't sort of have that negative feeling about people. I love bringing people together, like you said, and I get joy and excitement and energy from meeting new people. So having collections of photographers, I know myself what it feels like to work alone, or to wish you had somebody just to talk shop with. So, last year I started creating photographers groups so that we can network together and just chat and make new friends and build new networks. I've been doing it a long time, actually, when I think about it, because I always attend, workshops and other photographer training back in the day. So that's how I first started realizing that it's great to be around, your cohort, and build that out so that it helps build your industry for yourself, builds out the information so that you have somebody to go to, your colleagues to go to for ideas and information and feedback, all that sort of thing. So when I was building my art career as a photographer, I created an artist group so that we could all, have coffee together as well. And during COVID, we'd do Zooms together, show each other our work. So, yeah, and I do with women in business as well. So I collect all my clients and introduce them to one another so that, they can leverage their network from knowing, another person in the industry or somebody separate from the industry, so that they can maybe use them somehow and hire their services. So it all just sort of goes around in a little circle and brings me a lot of joy. And I know people love it because they're too shy to do it themselves.
I feel like you're the one that just gives a little nudge to people, or come and talk to this person, or did you know that Susie also loves the colour blue, or, this person loves horses. Oh, talk about that. So I think you just have this natural personality. And I know that you say it really helps you when you're shooting social events as well, because you're there to take photos of people, aren't you? So you have no problem with saying, I'm the photographer, can I take a photo of you? Can you tell me more about maybe how you've overcome your fear of, maybe there wasn't a fear in the beginning, but how you approach strangers in event situations and ask them to take the photo?
Yeah, that can be hard. Like, as extroverted as I am, and I love making friends and all that, when I used to go to an event, like a corporate event or a gala dinner or something like a conference or whatever, I would feel nervous having to do the social side of the event, where you've got to do groups of people having fun. That would really freak me out. And I was able to handle it, but I guess the way I figured out a little key to making that work for me was, instead of being timid and waiting sort of hovering over people and be like, oh, I'm trying to get a photo of you, and just be all nervous about it. I actually switched it around, and I was like, approached them purposefully and said, I'm going to take a photo of you guys. Would you mind getting together just for the social pages for Canberra Times or whatever? Explain what it's for, ask them to do it, and then they do it. Because if you hover and you're just sort of timid and fluffing around, people are awkward and they kind of sense you there and they don't know whether to pose or not. And then it makes this messy picture. And then the whole night you're delivering these images that are just sort of half-assed. I just learned to be more direct and ask for the image. And that helped me get over it and do it easier now. I don't have that issue anymore.
It's very similar to, I guess, in a social situation, like I just explained before, we were at the portrait gallery and you weren't saying, oh, do you want to come sit with us? It was, come sit down right next to me. Have you met so-and-so? And it's a lot more, I guess, you're not bullying people, but suddenly, like I said, I had no choice in being your friend. And I love being your friend and one of my closest friends, but you kind of, 5 minutes later, you're like, what just happened? Now I have 10 new friends and they're all photographers and I know exactly where they're from.
Yeah, I guess I don't do it to people who I kind of read the room, and I knew you could handle it. And I know you by nature that you are a really friendly person, but you won't go out of your way to connect with people because you're more introverted. So having a leader as a friend who's going to lead you into a situation that I know you can handle, then that's okay. And then you can unsubscribe anytime you want. You can say, I've got to go to the bathroom, I'm out of here.
Well, that actually leads me to, and it's quite a personal question, I guess, from my perspective, is when you've got people like me who are a little bit nervous in front of the lens, very confident behind the lens and directing, creative directing and organising people. But as soon as they step in front of the lens, or people at an event who suddenly see you and you can see their face change and they're like, oh, I'm being watched by a photographer, and they get really awkward. How have you learnt to make people feel comfortable taking their photo at such a vulnerable point, especially when it's one-on-one? Like, what have you learnt along the years to make someone feel more comfortable?
I think sometimes it's about meeting them where they're at. So if they have issues around their body or their face or their hair or their loss of hair or anything like that, just giving them that moment to express their concerns about the way they look and letting them share it with you, give them a solution and say, look, yes, all right, don't worry, I can retouch your hair a little bit, or I'm going to, photograph you in a way that's not going to emphasize that side of your body, or how about I show you along the way what I'm doing and I'll show you the back of the camera, and if you don't like it, you won't offend me, you just have to tell me and I'll try something else. So I'm always collaborating with them so that they feel like they still have control. Because when you're a little bit shy in front of the camera, or you have body issues or something that you don't want visible, you feel out of control and you feel like, oh, I'm just going to hate everything that the photographer does. And if the photographer doesn't give you the time of day and is just in there to do business and get out, then your experience is not going to be memorable in a good way. And people have come to me who've had photographers in the past and they're like, I've come to you because I've had this bad experience before. I don't want that again. This person didn't give me the time of day. They didn't give me the grace I needed because of my certain issues. And I'm hoping today can be different. And I know, because I've photographed people over 20 years, I know how to read their nature and sort of adapt to and accommodate to what they need, and still get what I need as well, and still be professional at the same time.
I'm sure you've got a lot of fellow photographers who are listening to your podcast who are maybe starting out their business or starting out as photographers, or maybe they've been in the biz for, a little bit longer and they, like you said, expanding their circles and want to hear what other photographers are doing. What would you say to yourself, thinking even 5 years ago or 6 years ago? How long have you had the business? Six years?
Yeah, maybe a little bit less.
So thinking back to 6 years ago when you'd left defence and you were sobbing as you walked away from Russell and, shedding the identity that you had for so long before that, what would you say to your younger self 6 years ago about where you're headed and where you are now, what reassurance would you give yourself?
Probably that what you don't know, you'll figure out along the way. I was scared of not knowing things, but forgot that I'll figure it out. And I think since leaving and running my own business, I've learned how to figure things out, and that's given me confidence to know that I can, tick more boxes. I can learn how to do marketing. I can learn design a little bit better. I can do all those things just by seeking the teachers. I know how to look for teachers to teach me stuff, and I can figure it out and build more confidence that way.
You're a very motivated person anyway, so I think you see that as a challenge to say, well, I don't know how to do my accounting, or I don't know how to do my BAS or my tax, or I don't know how to start a podcast. Who's done that before me? How can I find out? Where can I go? What are the other things that you did, or as you do ongoing in your work, that you look to for places of information or inspiration?
Inspiration is a huge one for me because I'm a visual artist, right? And so I need to be stimulated visually. And I think what's helped me elevate myself as a photographer over the years is learning outside of photography. So what I mean by that is instead of going to all the photography conferences back in the day, there used to be heaps of them with Nikon and AIPP, all that. I would stop going to them. I'd go for about 5 years, and then I want to learn from graphic design. And I used to go to semi-permanent conference every year. And I want to go to painting exhibitions and everything that's on in the big national galleries in all around the world. I'd travel and I will see a new exhibition. Any opportunity I get, I would see what work is being done, what photographers are thinking in, China or Japan, wherever I was going. I would learn what contemporary art looks like there, what conversations they're having through their work. Yeah, developing myself through other art forms, learning from other art forms is a huge, huge thing. And information, well, look at Instagram. There's coaches left, right, and center. So if I want to learn how to use Canva or email marketing, there's people, throwing themselves at me every single day. So there's no shortage of coaches. And I've got, my bucket of people I follow and usually buy everything that they do and attend all their trainings. So just always constantly got my fingers out there, learning, trying to upskill, level up, get inspired by what's happening. Books, I still collect photography books. Magazines, totally obsessed with magazines and imagery. And I have been since I was a teenager. So I think learning through images, especially through magazines, which I used to do in my spare time, that has given me the collection of how image is made. What makes a successful image? I'd see it in a magazine, and now that I'm a corporate photographer, I know how to replicate that because I studied it when I saw it in Country Living magazine or Harper's Bazaar, whatever. I actually paid attention without sort of really knowing it. I've absorbed that detail, and now I know how to use that information. Yeah.
And you're doing quite a lot of work with mentoring other photographers or younger photographers who maybe are going through school like you did, through TAFE. Tell me about the joy that you get from helping other people. Like, you help other people, say you help me. We talk a lot about business. We talk a lot about creativity. But I think there's something about reinvesting into your own industry that I know brings us both a lot of joy. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you help younger photographers maybe work out their portfolios or understand technical knowledge a little bit better?
I think part of the reason for starting the podcast was a huge factor in giving back to my industry that gave me so much, because when I think of the mentors that I used to watch, like Sue Bryce or Jasmine Starr when she was a photographer back in the day, they gave so much free knowledge, and I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity. I didn't grow up with YouTube or anything, but I used to watch photography documentaries on DVD, things like that, and learning from them helped me along the way. So therefore, now that I've come so far, I can return the favor to the community, and whoever, likes my vibe, wants to follow me, pick up some tips here and there. I'm giving back through the podcast and through, some free webinars or masterclasses. Taught one at the National Portrait Gallery, taught some masterclasses there, and I'll be doing more classes. So, I think that's how we learn, and people love to learn from somebody that they trust and somebody they value. YouTube just can't cut it all the time. You've got to have a mentor that, that's going to nurture you through the way, not just a one-off video here and there. You've got to find somebody that's going to lead you and continue on the journey with you. And I think that can make a lot more impact.
Absolutely. So just as we wrap up, what's next for you? What does the year ahead hold for Grace Costa Photographer?
Do you know what? I was always thinking about making a photo book, especially with my horse series. A lot of people know me through photographing horses in my personal work and the exhibitions I've had with that. And what would stop me is thinking, I don't have a big enough portfolio for a really nice hardcover coffee table book. But last year with the National Photographic Portrait Prize, I did a workshop, which was a photo book workshop. And they showed me all different versions of photo books. And it made me realize I don't have to have the most fancy book. I can actually hand make this book. I can make it smaller. I can make it intimate. It can be low cost, and I can actually get it done. So that is on my list. I'm also doing a little bit of home videos. So I'm creating a home video at the moment, just like for my family. And that's a different sort of tool that I'm not used to doing. I don't edit video very much at all, and I'm not really interested in it, but I gave myself this little project to do make a home video and make use of those little clips that I've been filming on my Nikon ZFC. So just trying to create outside of my usual stuff is good. And I've picked up my Polaroid camera again, got some black and white film. I'm trying an alternative process. Alternative processes are really good for, sparking new ideas or branching out in different ways, because you're not just using the same old camera you use for work. You're learning a different sort of you're in a different playing field. And with a Polaroid camera, you only get one shot. There's only two exposures to choose from, light or dark, that's it. So I'm getting a lot of joy from this imperfect Polaroid process right now as well, and letting go of the perfection of a digital photo where you can fix it all in post. That's fun for me, even though it's very expensive to do Polaroid films, but I don't care. I'm just going to play, and I want more time for play and just take photography less seriously, make some shitty stuff for a while until it becomes good and see what comes of it and share it with everyone along the way.
That sounds like a really great year ahead. Thank you so much for letting me have you as a guest on your own podcast and for letting me take over and sharing with your listeners a little bit more about you, maybe stuff that you wouldn't have said on your own, or maybe topics that you wouldn't have covered. So I'm very appreciative that you've had me as a guest, having you as a guest. So thank you very much.
Yes. That was so good, Trish. Thank you so much.
Fun.
That's it for today's episode. If you found it valuable, I invite you to leave a review so more people can find this podcast, or simply subscribe to be notified when each new episode drops. Until next time, see you later.